Start. Thank you very much. I can welcome everyone to the Justice Subcommittee on Policing second meeting of 2013. I can ask everyone to switch off mobile phones and other electronic devices completely as they interfere with the broadcasting system, even when switched to silent. No apologies have been received. Item 1. Yes?
Yes. The SPA board meeting started a meeting at 1 o'clock today, and the agenda includes the police budget and the delegation of powers. I think those are quite important matters. The agenda was not available until 4 hours ago. The standing orders suggest that they should be available 4 days beforehand. I mean, I don't think that's a good start, and I would like the committee to raise that issue with them. There are issues of governance and transparency.
Yeah.
You know,
it's on the record. We can certainly write to them indicating what your concerns, what you've said, and our concerns that it's not a good start. And there have been a little faltering starts before that as well. Exactly. I now move on, and just coming to item 1, the only item on the agenda, approach to developing a work programme and consideration of our approach. We had an initial discussion of our work programme last week and agreed to hold an evidence session with the Scottish Police Authority and Chief Constable. Unfortunately, it was not possible to arrange that session for this week. I think, in fairness, it was quite short notice. So I'm going to admit what says here, plenty of time today, don't know who wrote that, to have a full discussion. We have time today to have a full discussion on the way forward for the subcommittee. Now, paper 1 provides background information on the Police and Firearms Scotland Act 2012 and highlights some current issues related to police reform, which you probably know already. Anyway, we have 6 meetings until summer recess, and during this discussion it would be useful to consider how we'd wish to approach these meetings. A couple of options are provided in the paper. We could, for example, hold a series of evidence sessions with the main police bodies to establish particular areas of work to undertake. Alternatively, we could decide to prioritise a couple of issues that we'd wish to focus on now and invite relevant witnesses to come along to give evidence on these particular issues. So I think the best way forward is probably just to get round the table and ask members for their views in turn, and of course you're also welcome to give more general views on the way forward for the subcommittee and what types of work you think it should do. And I'll start with you, Graham, I think, just because you're next to me.
That's kind of it. I think that from the sort of considerations of the past 3 issues appear to me to be important at this stage. Probably another 100, but 3. One is about the relationships between the various institutions that make up the new National Police Service for Scotland. And by that I mean the authority, police service, government relationships. The second matter, which I think is equally pressing, local policing arrangements and the types of relationships that are created at local level to ensure appropriate accountability and that local voice is heard. And I suppose the third one is about national responsibilities and how the service will deliver those in short term. That's about organised crime, counter-terrorism and some of the big stuff.
Alison.
I mirror much of what Graham said, really, because I want to look at whether or not the issues between the SPA and the Police Scotland are properly resolved, or whether it was just a kind of stick and plaster compromise that's around, and therefore scrutinising the new scheme of delegation, which I haven't had time to read about yet, and looking at the budget decisions they've taken would be useful. Accountability, certainly we'd like to explore how the local accountability is being delivered. It seems to me there's lots of different patterns around the country, and it would just be interesting to pick up whether or not they feel they really are able to make the kind of difference that they want, not only with their community policing. My concern is probably around about how the national policing decisions are scrutinised locally, how they're able to interact with those. I know that there are quite clear ideas from the SPA about how the local policing plan will reflect local policing priorities, but clearly there's a cut across from the national. So Kevin? I'd like to look at that.
I share a number of the views that have been expressed there. I think the local policing scenario is something that we should all be interested in, and I really do think that we need to scrutinise that to a degree. there are some things which are maybe not quite so sexy, convener, in some folks' eyes, but things round about custody visits, and one of the other things which we've talked about previously in evidence is complaints. I want to see how complaints are being handled. There was some good practice in certain areas, some not so good practice in others, and I would want to ensure that that practice is exported right across the new force area. Beyond that, I don't think that we should just sit here and give evidence. I think we need to get out and about. I would like to see what's going on in forensics. I wouldn't mind a visit to Gartcosh to see what's going on there. And some of the other things which I think have always been interesting for me are things like the policing of trunk roads, for example, where there are often in some areas a lot of complaints round about that. I think the key issue, though, the first thing in my mind is the local scenario.
Margaret.
Thank you, Convener. I think, first of all, just to look at the approach, I think it would be good to see how the bill beds in, and from that have a mixture of evidence sessions and perhaps then look at some specific issues. So rather than deciding one approach or the other, just see which fits best. There was no full business case done. There's some real concerns, I think, about the savings, which were a key factor of having a single police force. Whether they're going to be realised. So I'd like to look at some of the budget implications as we go along. Forensic services, and I suppose that comes into counter-terrorism and all the rest of it now put together, I think would be a very interesting area to look at to see if this really is bedding down and having the very positive effect that having this located in one particular place should have. The day-to-day policing at a local level and how that's going now that there are no longer any of the police boards, and accountability generally, and it could quite easily fit in with Kevin's suggestion of complaints now that the Complaint Commissioner has an added role of investigative powers.
Thank you. John.
Thank you, Convener. Well, I don't dissent from anything that's been said there. Can I just suggest that, and this relates to paragraph 23 in the paper that we have, where it talks about the role of the Inspectorate of Constabulary there, and the final sentence which says HMICS is to publish a plan setting out inquiry priorities and details of how these inquiries will be carried out in proportionate, accountable and transparent way. And I just think perhaps the chronology of how we do things might be shaped with that. So that, if you like, if we were looking at the complaint system and that's part of the process, it would be better informed doing it after the completion of that. So just the timing of that.
I'm afraid there's just a typo there, because actually at 25 it says it published its plan on 8th of March, so it is published.
Right, okay.
But that's not your mistake, it just is to publish. It has published.
Well, I do beg your pardon.
No,
I was
it's not.
focusing on that one there.
It's a bit misleading.
Well then, indeed, that may inform our chronology, I would suggest, because we'll get more information. To me, the most important issue is how things are delivered on the ground. So the compilation of the police plans, a scrutiny of how that process went, because it has to be an evolving process, and the community's needs change, and it's how these plans can. Because we talked about community councils, there's reference to council wards being involved, and I would hate to think there's been a mishmash and it's all been added together, because there are very distinct communities, even within council wards, that would have particular needs. So the local plans and how they feed into the overall process is of interest to me. Also, support staff numbers. I don't think we can avoid that issue, challenging though it is, and just to address the concerns rightly aired with us by Unison about police support staff services being dispensed with and the roles being filled by police officers, because we've had some conflicting information on that, and I think it would be good to know where the position actually rests at the moment. And again, that may be a changing situation. So for me, the main things would be the local policing, some of the numbers there, and also I would want some look at the procedures by which there's been the high-profile coverage of the folk engaged on daily rates at considerable sums of money with no apparent, and the words here, open competition. Now we know what we're talking about here. And
I've said that's the SPA's job now, and then it'd be our job to see if the SPA had done it.
Yes.
Well, I'm not going to split. I think we need to have a
No, I agree, but I
think
think we don't need to do the SPA's job for them. I think Graham's agreeing with me there. That's really what they ought to be doing.
Yeah.
Whether or not they do it is another matter. So I think that's what we would be keeping
right.
our eye on both, rather than us.
But you can make an argument that the SPA has brought about this situation, because that's where these people are working. It's the chair that's engaged these people.
But I think that, I mean, the concerns that you've raised and
right,
what
I'm
you've
not
said are accurate. I think that where the mechanism should work is that we should ask the SPA to account to us for these decisions.
Well, for the ones of doubt, that's what I'm suggesting.
Oh, I see, right.
Yes,
No,
yes,
right you go.
Yeah. Could I say, supplementary to what John's just outlined there, the one element that none of us have mentioned is the IT provision across Scotland. There's no doubt that very substantial sums of money have been spent over the last decade providing IT solutions, but we are still in a position where there is no joined up IT solution for Scotland, and I'm not aware, I know that there are teams working on various solutions, but I'm not aware of any proposals as yet to link the IT systems, and until that's done we don't have a single police force in reality. We still have a load of people who may well be wearing the same uniform but won't be able to communicate with each other in the way that an effective service might otherwise.
I'm just trying to, sorry about that, Graham, I'm just trying to work out, I mean, it's a great list and there's nothing wrong with it. It's simply that we've got our first meeting when we first come back on the 18th of April, and what I'm considering and suggesting is that having gone through these various things, this, we write to the SPA and to the POS, the Prison Service, PSS, and ask them to comment on the progress made on all these issues that we've raised, have that prior to our meeting. How long would that give us? Because it's over recess. And if we're back in the, and then it's so that we are able to focus on something. We don't want to just be scattered in effect, you know, with all these things. What would you like to, we would be in a position to, having got that response, do we want just to discuss the response? How long is it?
We could have the SP and PSOS in.
We could ask them both in to speak to the response. What do you think?
Convener, since all of us have talked about local policing, and some of us have had the opportunity to meet the DCC in charge,
Yes.
but not everyone. I think that, should we do that first? I think that that is the thing that is of most concern. And, you know, we don't need a huge amount of paperwork and all of the rest to pose the questions that we no doubt have.
No, I'm happy about that at all. I think it's still useful to list the areas we'll be doing, ask for progress report from both of the bodies that I mentioned, and certainly we're talking about DCC Fitzpatrick, I think it was, who's very interesting, and ask, because that seems to be one of the main issues, then she could be our first witness. But we would still have that other paper before us with the responses and be able to pick things out of it. Graham?
I think the suggestion of local policing is a useful one, because I think local policing is the most sensitive issue at this time. All the high-level strategy is one thing. When you pick the phone up and ask for the police, you want some indication of how is that going to be delivered from the 1st of April onwards. So I think that is the most sensitive priority. I'm slightly concerned that if we list, I mean, I've scribbled down all the headlines, if we list all these things and ask them to report on them, we actually need another authority to be created to answer all these questions. I think it might be useful to send them down. No, I think it might be useful to send them a letter that says, here are all the issues that we've identified today that are of interest to us, and we're going to try and work through these issues in an organised fashion, and then indicate what we would like a response to in the first instance. And at least they've then got a clue of the kinds of things that we are interested in. And they might come back to us and say, because of the way the HMI is going about their business, because of the other things that are going on, it might be helpful to deliver on this issue at a particular time, and we can make up our mind if that suits us.
Fine. And so what we can do that's absolutely fine, and then focus on local policing arrangements and accountability and the local police plans that we've heard about.
Yeah.
I would be keen that there's an understanding on the recipient of the letters that that's not an exhaustive list. This is just an initial list.
Oh, no, no, no. I don't think they think that for 1 minute.
Yes.
But you've got that on the record anyway. So I think that's just to do these. And of course, this is a public meeting, so they've got, and they'll be listening to looking at the OR. You're content? The time we've got is always so we've got to be focused, because next meeting will also just be an hour or so.
Yeah.
I'm interested in this general discussion on visits. So there's nothing to beat them sometimes, as we know from our prison visits and everything else. You just get a feel for things. How do you feel about that, and how we'd factor that into what I know is a crowded day for everybody, a crowded week? I do want to leave Mondays and Fridays for members to have constituency business. We can't start really encroaching, but if we were able, perhaps, I don't know, I'm just thinking here, to do something in an afternoon as a dispensation from, looking at me, it's one of these looks like from chamber business, as long as it would be possible for some of us to go out and visit, then I think that would, I think the suggestion, I mean, to go, I can't remember what you said, what did you say?
Forensics, Gartcosh,
It'd be really good to get out and have as part of it. And do you want that, here we go, additional to the regular 1 hour meeting you're going to have every 2 weeks for the time initially anyway, to see how it flows?
Convener, I think it really has to be.
Yeah.
Right, that's grand.
This is a remit we've been given for a year. It's an exceptional set of circumstances, and I think the whips should be advised, because if we can be relieved on some things which aren't our core business sometimes that we're asked to speak on, it frees us up to have this flexibility and make this a priority.
Well, shall we set something in hand right away? What do you suggest? Sorry, John.
I wonder, given that this particular example has been cited on a number of occasions by proponents of the change and opponents, namely the custody facilities at St Leonard's Police Station, which isn't far from here, and the suggestion that there is an arrangement whereby operational officers can provide cover. The other side of the view is, from Unison, that this is not an understanding of the full range of custody facilities. I wonder if that would be an opportunity perhaps to meet, invite the trade union officials to be there when we do meet.
Margaret, what was that now?
The only thing I thought about Gartcosh, it may be their sensitivities as that comes and gets up and running, that maybe the earlier we visit that, the more access and the more kind of feel we would have for it. At this stage, it might be possible to have a clearer insight. That's the only reason for prioritising Gartcosh.
Guided by what? Who feels what?
Can we invite a response on whether Gartcosh is fit for visit? And
you would then support that, would you, Graham? And what
yes,
about Alison as a start? Specialist crime division.
I think the visitation to custody suite would be quite useful, and it would give us a feel at the front line. How do they see the single police force developing at this early stage?
Well, can we have a couple of ideas then, and if we can arrange something, I don't know what the business is for the week we're back, I need to find out, but if we're able to do it, to do it for...
The third thing I would suggest is forensic science. There are concerns about the new arrangements there. It'd be useful to get first-hand view.
So let me just get this clear, because we know the way forward with the other part. We're going to, there's the OR, we're going to highlight certain things, say we're going to look at we want to focus on local policing, accountability. The first meeting, probably have DCC Rose Fitzpatrick along. I don't know if you made the presentation, who made it. Both herself and DCC Ian Livingston, extremely interesting, in who's the Specialist Crime Division. So we'll have her along, and we will also try to put in that week a visit to, Gartcosh or forensics. Where are the forensics? I don't know where they're located.
They're still spread out around the country.
So we'll find a place, so one or the other. If we can fix that in that week. And even if all members can't make it, because it's one of our fact-finding is the safe visits, try to get as many members as possible that will be freed up that day to go to it. I think that's a very good idea.
Could, in the communication to the force about the local accountability, without being insensitive.
You're never insensitive, Graham.
Can we indicate?
You're so subtle.
Could we indicate to the officer that we would like some information about what practically is on the ground now in terms of community responses and so forth. We heard from her about the philosophy and the vision of the thing. So we understand what they're trying to do. Can we find out what's happening around the country in reality and what the plan is for practical delivery? So we can really touch some of the realities of this thing.
I think she'll work that out as well if she's coming for us. And I think because we're in the odd position this year, these short scrutiny sessions, I think it's useful to let local government members should know that we're doing this. COSLA, to let them know we're doing it. We can't have them along to respond, obviously, but that they should listen in. They may then feed back to us. So I think to let COSLA know when we're calling people or other interested parties when we're calling to the evidence sessions, because the Justice Committee can always return if any big issue arises. Alison.
I was just going to suggest that we contacted COSLA to invite them to submit anything in advance, even it might be helpful.
I think I'd like to hear I'd hear what's said and hear the response. I mean, there's no harm in telling them we're going to do it. It might feed us some questions. That's certainly. We'll do both. I think that would be fair enough. John?
On the administration of how we'll work, Convener, and I know this applies to any meeting, but the maximum advance notification of papers and things like that would be very helpful given the relatively short time frame we're working on at the moment in which to...
Yeah, we normally send them out on a Monday, so okay.
They're normally out on a Monday, which really is not, I mean, given that they're doing the usual times, and we've got them on a Monday and we're not sitting till the Thursday. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's what we usually have.
Certainly if they're ready, we can send them out on a Friday.
Yeah. You get them earlier. I love this system where I've got to my ear bend. We could, if it's ready on a Friday, John, we'll make a special effort for you because you might be a slow reader. We don't know.
Yes, very slow. Widely acknowledged.
Yes, I'm making it clear the visits would be in an afternoon in chamber time, maybe depending what we need, a couple of hours or an hour or so. I mean, we don't always have to be there for every debate, but obviously we're not going to. We hope they're not. We'll let the business managers know what our plans. We've got a business manager sitting here, so that we can let them know not to factor in our justice debate that afternoon. Would be quite handy. Or a local government one. I've not forgotten about you. Or indeed equal opportunities. So there you are.
You know, the list goes on. Convener, if the visits become difficult and we don't know what will be decided about whether or not we'll be allowed to miss chamber business, or we can have those visits at the same time, it may be an idea to consider splitting into wee groups and going visiting places across the country. I've got absolutely no problem with doing that at all, and we have a fair geographical spread around the table, but there's no reason why 2 or 3 of us couldn't get together and visit something in a place quite near us, even if that's on a constituency day. If it's quite near your constituency, it's not quite so bad.
But I think it's also helpful. No, we do this anyway, as you know, but what would also be helpful is if at least collectively we could go somewhere and come back with the same, the same kind of experience, well, the same experience, but having been together at some place and reflect collectively on it. But of course we all pick up stuff from our constituencies as we go along, so there's nothing to stop people doing that. Well, I'm content with that. I think that's we've not done too badly. We were to do this. They'll not all be as short as this, but I was aiming for 1:45. It's not too bad, 1:39. So unless you have anything else, I'll conclude the meeting.
That's time yours for future meetings.
In hand, I do indeed. Thank you very much, Graham. Always to the last word. Thank you.